The air in the briefing room was thick with the scent of ambition and stale coffee. It was the final day of the selection trials for the Experimental Aerospace Group, a program designed to find the pilot of the future. The 20 candidates who remained were the best of the best, honed to a razor's edge by a decade of conventional training. They sat in neat rows, their flight suits crisp, their postures radiating a taut, predatory confidence. And then there was Major Anya Sharma. She sat in the back, a quiet island in a sea of nervous energy. She was 34, but the severe way she pulled her dark hair back and the focused stillness in her gray eyes made her seem older. It wasn't just her demeanor that set her apart. It was the jacket. While the others wore the latest generation of sage green Nomex, bristling with squadron patches and zippers, Anya wore a brown leather A2 flight jacket. It was an antique, its surface cracked and scuffed with age, the knit cuffs slightly frayed. It was a relic from another time, a piece of history worn without irony, and in this room of cutting-edge warriors it was a target. Colonel Marcus Reed stood at the podium, his presence as sharp and unyielding as the crease in his uniform trousers. His eyes, the color of chipped slate, swept over the candidates, assessing, dissecting. He was a man forged in the doctrine of network-centric warfare, a believer in systems, data links, and the overwhelming power of technology. His gaze lingered on the top candidates, men with names like Razor and Jester, who looked like they were sculpted from polished titanium, and then slid over Anya, his brow tightening for a fraction of a second. He saw the jacket, and in his mind the dismissal was already complete. Today, you face the final test, Reed began, his voice a low baritone that cut through the tension. You will not be flying an aircraft. You will be flying the Aegis Series 7 simulator. Specifically, you will be running Scenario 734. Operation Serpent's Tooth. A murmur went through the room. Serpent's Tooth was a legend, a ghost story whispered in mess halls. It was the program's Kobayashi Maru, an unwinnable scenario designed not to test skill, but to see how a pilot broke. It combined a low-altitude ingress through a treacherous canyon system, a dynamic storm front, and a thinking, learning enemy AI that had defeated every pilot who had ever faced it. Your objective is to provide close air support for a compromised ground team and cover their extraction, Reed continued, his eyes cold. Success is not expected. We are evaluating your process under catastrophic failure conditions. We want to see who can manage the chaos, who can think when the sky is falling. The pilot of the future is a manager of systems, not some romantic barnstormer. His gaze flickered towards Anya's jacket again. The intended recipient of the barb perfectly clear. A few of the younger pilots smirked. One whispered to another, "Looks like someone's granddad is missing his jacket." Anya heard him. Her expression did not change. She simply sat, her hands resting calmly in her lap, a silent rebuke to the noise around her. The central conflict was not in the air. It was here, in this room, a battle of perception she had already seemingly lost. The dismissal was as swift as it was silent. As Colonel Reed detailed the parameters of the simulation, he directed his questions and his attention exclusively to the front rows. He spoke of sensor fusion, of data link management, and of leveraging the fifth-generation platform's stealth capabilities to bypass the primary threats. He called on Lieutenant Commander Thorne, Razor, a pilot with a perfect record and an ego to match. "Thorne, what's your ingress strategy against a dense, networked IADS?" Reed asked, his tone indicating this was the only correct opinion to solicit. "Sir, I'd maintain altitude," Razor said, his voice smooth and confident. "Use the storm front for electronic cover, punch through the SAM corridor on a high-energy trajectory, and let the jet's low observable characteristics do the work. Get in fast, drop ordnance, get out clean." "The textbook answer," Reed said with a nod of approval. "Speed, stealth, and technology. That is how we win." He looked around the room, his gaze a challenge. "Anyone have a different approach? Something that doesn't involve treating a $30 million avionics suite like a crop duster?" The silence was thick. No one dared contradict the colonel or challenge the top candidate. His eyes passed over Anya again, a flicker of something between pity and contempt in them. He didn't ask for her input. In his assessment, she was already a washout, a relic whose presence was a mild administrative annoyance. The jacket was more than just non-standard clothing. It was a symbol of an obsolete philosophy. It represented instinct over instrumentation, airmanship over algorithms. To Reed, it was a sign of someone who didn't belong in the future he was trying to build. The briefing concluded. The pilots stood, stretching, their nervous energy returning. The whispers started again, quiet but sharp. "Did you see that jacket? I think my local museum has one on a mannequin," another pilot chimed in. "Maybe she thinks this is a history exam." The mockery was casual, born of the pack mentality that thrives in hyper-competitive environments. They saw her as an outsider, an anomaly. Her silence was misinterpreted as weakness, her stoicism as a lack of the requisite aggressive fire. Anya pushed her chair back and stood, the worn leather of her jacket groaning softly. She walked past the clusters of her peers, their sideways glances and hushed comments washing over her like insignificant turbulence. She didn't meet their eyes. Her focus was already 1,000 yards away, in the cold, sterile hum of the simulator bay. She was used to this. The skepticism, the underestimation, it had followed her through her entire career. It was the price of being different, of holding onto a legacy that others had discarded as old-fashioned. She didn't need their approval. The only judgment that mattered was that of the machine, and the only proof of worth was performance. As she pushed through the doors, a young tech sergeant in a worn maintenance uniform watched her go, his eyes holding not mockery, but a flicker of curiosity. The walk to the simulator bay was a transition from the charged atmosphere of human judgment to the cold, impartial world of machinery. The hallway was long, lit by sterile fluorescent strips that hummed with a low, constant frequency. The air smelled of ozone and hydraulic fluid. Anya's boots echoed rhythmically on the polished concrete floor, a solitary sound. The other candidates followed in a loose, chattering group, their voices bouncing off the walls, dissecting Reed's briefing and posturing about their own strategies for Serpent's Tooth. Anya walked ahead, alone. She arrived at the bay where the 8 Aegis Series 7 pods sat like giant, dormant insects. They were marvels of technology, matte black spheres on hydraulic gimbals, capable of recreating the physical and mental stress of aerial combat with terrifying fidelity. Tech Sergeant Elias Vance, a young man with sharp eyes and grease permanently etched into the lines of his knuckles, was running final diagnostics on Pod 3. He looked up as Anya approached. Unlike the pilots, his gaze held no judgment, only a quiet, professional assessment. He'd seen dozens of hotshots come and go, their confidence often inversely proportional to their performance in the box. Anya stopped beside the pod and began her preparation. It was a ritual, methodical, and unhurried. The other pilots were already suiting up, zipping their Nomex, adjusting their G-suits with sharp tugs, their movements quick and full of nervous energy. Anya slowly unzipped her leather jacket. She folded it carefully, reverently, and laid it on a clean patch of bench. Vance noticed a faded, almost invisible patch sewn on the inside lining, just below the collar. A simple, hand-stitched compass rose. She pulled on her G-suit and helmet, her movements economical and precise. There was no wasted motion. Before climbing the ladder to the pod, she paused. From a small pocket on her flight suit, she pulled out a single, worn leather glove. It was the left one, the leather darkened with age and oil, the stitching on the fingers frayed from thousands of hours of use. It was a pilot's glove, but from a different era, unpadded, unadorned. It had belonged to her father. She slid it onto her hand, the worn leather fitting her like a second skin. It was the only part of her ritual that wasn't purely practical. It was a connection, a touchstone. Vance watched, intrigued. He saw the other pilots taping notes to their kneeboards, preloading navigation data, their focus entirely on the digital interface. Anya ran her gloved hand along the cold metal railing of the access ladder. She closed her eyes for a single moment, taking a deep, centering breath. It wasn't a prayer. It was a calibration. She was tuning out the noise, the mockery, the pressure, and listening for a different signal. "Pod 3 is calibrated and ready, Major," Vance said, his voice quiet. "Thank you, Sergeant," she replied, her voice calm and even. She ascended the ladder and settled into the cockpit. The interior of the Series 7 was a perfect replica of the F-35's advanced cockpit, a seamless wall of glass displays and touchscreen controls. But Anya's first action was not to power on the main systems. Her gloved hand moved with familiarity over the physical controls that remained. The throttle, the stick, the rudder pedals. She tested their tension, their travel, feeling the mechanical soul beneath the digital skin. It was a gesture of respect for the machine, an old-school habit that the system managers had forgotten. To them, the aircraft was a computer with wings. To her, it was an extension of her own body. The canopy hissed shut, sealing her in. The world outside vanished, replaced by the hum of the pod's life support and the soft glow of the standby instruments. The dismissal, the whispers, the mocking glances, they were all gone. Here, in the heart of the machine, she was no longer the woman in the old jacket. She was just the pilot, and the storm was waiting. The world materialized around her. The panoramic display screens flickered to life, painting a hyper-realistic vista of a bruised, turbulent sky. The roar of the simulated engine filled the cockpit, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the seat and into her bones. The hydraulic gimbals tilted sharply, mimicking the sensation of sitting on an active runway. A voice, cool and digitized, echoed in her helmet. Scenario 734. Operation Serpent's Tooth. Initializing. Outside the simulated canopy, rain began to streak across the glass, driven by a savage wind. Jagged peaks clawed at the angry, slate-gray clouds. This was the entrance to the Serpent's Tooth Canyon system, a place that existed only in code but was designed with a geologist's eye for malice. The mission clock appeared in the top right of her helmet-mounted display, 45:00. Below it, the objective flashed: locate and support compromised Pathfinder team. Callsign Viper cover extraction from Zone Alpha. Major Sharma, you are cleared for launch. Colonel Reed's voice cut through the comms, devoid of warmth. He was in the observation room, a darkened amphitheater where he and a handful of evaluators could watch a composite display of the ongoing simulation. Anya's gloved hand pushed the throttle forward. The simulated afterburner kicked in, a physical jolt as the pod tilted back, pressing her into her seat. The runway lights blurred into streaks of white. With a smooth pull on the stick, she was airborne, climbing into the maelstrom. The turbulence was violent. The pod shuddered and bucked, a testament to the simulation's fidelity. In the observation room, Reed watched her icon on the tactical display, a green triangle ascending into a swirling red mass that represented the storm front and the enemy's integrated air defense system. "Let's see the textbook approach," he muttered to the officer beside him, expecting her to follow Thorne's proposed high-altitude strategy. The other candidates, waiting for their turn, watched on a secondary screen in the ready room, a few of them smirking, ready to watch the woman in the old jacket fail spectacularly. But Anya did not climb. At 3,000 feet, just below the angriest part of the storm, she stopped her ascent. The green triangle on Reed's display wavered, then tilted down, sharply. "What is she doing?" the officer next to Reed asked, leaning forward. "She's diving. She's lost her nerve," someone whispered in the ready room. Anya wasn't diving. She was hunting. She pushed the nose of her jet toward the canyon mouth, a dark, jagged slit in the mountainside. The wind shear was brutal, trying to tear the wings from the fuselage. Alarms shrieked through the cockpit: terrain proximity, wind shear warnings. She silenced them with a flick of a switch. She didn't need a computer to tell her she was close to the ground. She could feel it in the way the air behaved, the way the turbulence changed from open sky chop to the channeled violence of the canyon. She entered the Serpent's Tooth less than 100 feet above the churning river that had carved it. The canyon walls, rendered in stunningly high resolution, rushed past her canopy, so close she could see the glistening rain on individual rocks. She was now completely below the enemy's primary radar network. She had bypassed the entire system not with stealth technology, but with pure, audacious flying. In the observation room, the room was silent. On the tactical map, Anya's icon had vanished. For a moment, Reed thought she had crashed. Then, Elias Vance, the tech sergeant monitoring the system's data stream, pointed to a faint line on his own terminal. "Sir," he said, his voice quiet with awe. "She's not gone. She's in the canyon. She's flying on geologic data alone. The system, it barely knows how to track her." Reed stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. The barnstormer was showing him something new. The first move had stunned the observers into silence, but the simulation was just beginning. The AI controlling Serpent's Tooth was not a static set of threats. It was adaptive, designed to punish predictability and exploit weakness. It had never encountered a pilot who used the canyon floor as an infiltration route. For the first 90 seconds of Anya's ingress, the system was confused. Its primary search radars swept empty skies. Its long-range missile batteries sat dormant, their targeting parameters rendered useless. Then it learned. The AI retasked its assets. If the pilot would not come up into the sky, it would bring the threat down to her. Anya saw them first as flickers of movement high on the canyon walls. Unmanned aerial combat vehicles, small, agile drones detaching from hidden alcoves in the rock. The AI was using them as spotters. A new alarm, a short, sharp chirp, alerted her to a laser designation. A missile was coming not from the sky, but from a ground-based launcher hidden in the terrain ahead. In the observation room, Reed's knuckles were white where he gripped the console. "It's got her bracketed," he said. "The AI is using the canyon against her. She has no room to maneuver. This is it." Anya's response was instantaneous and shockingly precise. She didn't try to outclimb or jam the seeker. Instead, she rolled the jet 90 degrees, wings vertical, and pulled into a high G turn, forcing the aircraft deeper into a narrow bend of the canyon. The G-force hit her like a physical blow, the simulated pressure suit squeezing her legs and torso, her vision tunneling to a gray pinhole. She grunted, fighting to stay conscious. The missile, unable to replicate the turn in the confined space, screamed past her canopy and slammed into the opposite canyon wall in a silent, pixelated explosion. She leveled out, her breath ragged but controlled. 2 more laser warnings lit up her display. The AI was learning fast, setting up a complex ambush. "She's burning too much energy," one of the evaluators noted. "She won't have the fuel for the extraction." But Anya was flying with an efficiency that defied their models. Her throttle movements were minuscule, her control inputs fluid and deliberate. She wasn't fighting the turbulence. She was using it, riding the currents of wind like a hawk. When a gust tried to push her toward a wall, she would ease off the power and let the pressure difference guide her around a corner, conserving precious pounds of fuel. She was flying with a tactile, intuitive grace that the other pilots, trained to trust the autopilot and flight computer, simply did not possess. The drones began their attack runs, diving into the canyon, their cannons spitting streams of virtual tracers. This was the AI's true test, a close-quarters knife fight in a phone booth. The other candidates watched from the ready room, their earlier mockery forgotten, replaced by a stunned disbelief. "She's flying it like it's an F-16, Razor muttered, watching her jink and roll with an agility he didn't think the larger, more complex F-35 possessed. Anya flipped her weapon system to guns. She didn't fire wildly. She waited, letting a drone commit to its attack run. As it swooped in, she pulled the nose up sharply, not to attack, but to bleed speed in a controlled near-stall state. The drone, faster and less agile, overshot her. In that split second of vulnerability, she nosed down, achieved a firing solution, and squeezed the trigger. A single 3-second burst of cannon fire stitched across the drone's wing, and it cartwheeled into the river below. One burst, one kill. Precision born not of a targeting computer, but of pure predatory instinct. In the observation room, Colonel Reed leaned closer to the screen, his skepticism melting away, replaced by a dawning, unsettling respect. The AI, now fully adapted to her low-altitude tactics, changed its strategy again. It wasn't just trying to shoot her down, it was trying to trap her. As Anya navigated a particularly narrow section of the canyon, two advanced interceptors, simulated Su-57s, appeared on her display. They weren't above her. They were behind her, entering the canyon from where she had come, flying with the cold, calculated precision of machines. They were boxing her in. "She's got nowhere to go," the evaluator next to Reed stated, his voice flat. "The canyon walls prevent a defensive brake turn. Her energy state is too low to climb out. The drones are blocking her path forward. It's a perfect trap." On the screen in the ready room, the other candidates saw the same tactical dead end. "She has to eject," one of them said. "It's the only option." Anya's breathing remained steady in the comms, a slow, rhythmic cadence against the backdrop of screaming alarms. She knew her situation was critical. The interceptors were gaining, their weapon systems locking onto her. The drones ahead were forming a blockade. A straight line in any direction meant death. The textbook solutions, deploying flares, jamming, attempting to outrun, were useless here. The textbook was written for an open sky. So she threw the book away. Her left hand, the one in her father's worn glove, eased the throttle back, almost to idle. Her speed bled off rapidly. The lead interceptor, programmed to anticipate a desperate, full-throttle escape, surged closer, its pilot AI preparing for an easy kill. At the last possible second, just as the enemy's missile lock tone screamed in her ear, Anya did something that wasn't supposed to be possible in a fly-by-wire, fifth-generation fighter. She kicked the right rudder pedal, hard. Simultaneously, she pulled back on the stick and slammed the throttle into full afterburner. The aircraft, forced into a state outside its approved flight envelope, shuddered violently. It was a maneuver from a bygone era, a high-alpha rudder reversal, a brute force move that relied on raw aerodynamics and a pilot's intuitive feel for the edge of a stall. The F-35's flight computer tried to fight her, to correct what it saw as a fatal error, but Anya, anticipating this, had momentarily overridden its authority. The jet slewed sideways, its nose pointing almost 90 degrees off its direction of travel, its forward momentum plummeting. The lead interceptor, caught completely by surprise, shot past her, unable to compensate. For a dazzling, terrifying moment, Anya was stationary in the air, a ghost hanging in the canyon, before the nose snapped back in line and the afterburner caught, launching her forward like a stone from a slingshot. She was now behind her attacker. A clean missile lock tone chirped in her ear. She fired one heat seeker. It tracked perfectly, slamming into the interceptor's engine. The second AI pilot, seeing its wingman destroyed by an impossible maneuver, broke off its attack, climbing desperately out of the canyon, ceding the space to her. In the observation room, there was absolute silence. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Elias Vance stared at his console, at the telemetry data that painted a picture of a pilot who had bent the laws of physics to her will. "I've never seen that before," he whispered to himself. "Not in a simulation. Not in real life. That's not in the manual." Colonel Reed stood ramrod straight, his eyes locked on the main screen where Anya's jet, now clear of its pursuers, accelerated down the canyon. He had just witnessed a pilot communicate with her aircraft in a language he had forgotten existed. It wasn't about managing systems. It was about instinct, courage, and a profound, intimate understanding of the machine. It was the art of flying, and it was devastatingly beautiful. Having broken the AI's trap, Anya was now in the final stretch of the canyon. The turbulence eased as the chasm widened, opening into a small, bowl-shaped valley. Below her, nestled among shattered rocks and skeletal trees, was the reason for her perilous journey: the compromised Pathfinder team. Her sensors highlighted their positions, 6 figures, pinned down by heavy fire from enemy troops entrenched on the ridges surrounding the valley. Red icons swarmed the friendly blue ones. "Viper team, this is Wraith 1. Anya's voice came over the comms, a beacon of calm in the storm of simulated gunfire. I am on station. Mark your targets. The name Wraith hung in the air for a moment. It was not a call sign assigned by the program. It was her own. In the observation room, Reed frowned. It sounded familiar, a whisper from a half-forgotten intelligence brief. Wraith 1, this is Viper Lead. A desperate voice crackled back. Glad to see you. We're taking fire from the northern ridge. Machine gun nests at grid. I see them. Anya cut him off, her tone leaving no room for argument. She had already processed the tactical situation, her eyes and the jet's advanced sensors working in perfect harmony. She didn't need coordinates. She saw the muzzle flashes. She rolled in not with a high-altitude bombing run, but with a low, terrifying pass. She brought the F-35 down to treetop level, the roar of its engine a physical force that shook the valley. This wasn't about stealth anymore. It was about shock and awe. She selected the GAU-22/A, the aircraft's 25mm cannon. Viper, stay down, she commanded. A stream of incandescent green tracers erupted from the jet's nose. It was not a wild spray. It was a single, controlled burst of surgical violence. The rounds walked directly into the first machine gun nest, pulverizing the position into a cloud of digital dust and rock. She was so close, so precise, that the pathfinders on the ground could feel the heat from the impacts. She pulled up, jinked hard to avoid a volley of return fire, and rolled in for a second pass on the next target. One by one, with an efficiency that was both breathtaking and chilling, she dismantled the enemy's positions. Her passes were unpredictable. She used the valley's terrain, popping up from behind ridges, using the sun's glare, a ghost that struck and vanished. She communicated with the ground team with an economy of words that built instant trust. Wraith moving east to west. Second position, 10 seconds, clear to move. I have you covered. Within 3 minutes, the heavy fire on Viper team had ceased. The extraction helicopter, which had been holding in a safe zone, was now cleared to land. As it descended, a new threat emerged. 2 enemy armored vehicles crested a nearby hill, racing to intercept the landing zone. Wraith, we have armor, Viper Lead yelled. We can't get out. Anya had 1 guided bomb left, but she was low on fuel, and a climbing attack run would expose her to shoulder-fired missiles. Without hesitation, she dove toward the vehicles, descending to an altitude that was suicidally low. She was using the cannon again. That's a negative, Major, Reed said aloud in the observation room, as if she could hear him. The 25mm won't penetrate that armor. But Anya wasn't aiming for the armor. On her first pass, she didn't fire at the vehicles themselves. Her cannon rounds ripped into the rocky ground just in front of them, kicking up a massive wall of debris and dust, blinding their sensors and drivers. The lead vehicle swerved and crashed. On her second pass, she raked the second vehicle's exposed treads and optics, crippling it. She had neutralized 2 tanks with a cannon, not through brute force, but through a brilliant tactical application of the weapon. She had saved the team and preserved her last bomb. As the helicopter lifted off with Viper team safely aboard, she climbed, providing a final, watchful overwatch until they were clear. Mission complete, the Sim's voice announced. The screen went blank. The silence in the observation room was absolute. It was a heavy, profound silence, filled with the weight of shattered assumptions. The score appeared on the main screen, glowing in the darkness. Mission objectives, 100%. Tactical efficiency, 100%. Survival, 100%. The numbers were impossible. No one had ever scored perfectly on Serpent's Tooth. Most didn't even survive. Below the score, another line of text flashed, one that sealed the legend. New program record. Colonel Reed stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief. He had witnessed a performance that didn't just break the rules. It rewrote them. It was a visceral, undeniable demonstration of mastery that his data-driven, by-the-book philosophy could not account for. The mockery of the morning, his own dismissive attitude. It all seemed like a foolish, distant memory. He turned to the young tech sergeant. his voice low and urgent. "Vance, pull up Major Sharma's full service record. Everything you can find. I want to know where she came from." Elias Vance's fingers were already flying across his keyboard. He had a feeling the colonel would ask. The file loaded, a wall of black and white text. It was sparse, with long periods of service in unglamorous, forgotten corners of the world. Then Vance found it, a commendation letter from a special operations commander attached to her file from a border conflict years ago. He read a line aloud. "Major Sharma's unconventional, low-altitude flying was instrumental in the success of Operation Nightfall. The enemy never saw her coming. The ground teams she supported gave her a name." Reed looked at him, waiting. "They called her Wraith," Vance said softly. Reed's eyes went back to the blank screen where her score had been. Wraith, the call sign he had heard, the name from the whispered intelligence reports about a ghost pilot who could fly a cargo plane like a fighter and who single-handedly turned the tide of a dozen firefights. He had dismissed those reports as battlefield exaggerations, pilot folklore. But they weren't. The legend was real, and he had just mocked her for the jacket she wore. He finally understood. The jacket wasn't a costume. It was a mantle. It was the skin of a predator, and he had mistaken her for prey. A quiet, profound respect, cold and sharp as the mountain air in the simulation, settled over him. The hiss of the hydraulic seals was the only sound as the simulator pod's canopy swung open. A soft white light from within spilled into the dim bay, silhouetting Anya as she sat, perfectly still, in the cockpit. Her helmet was off, resting on her lap. Her chest rose and fell in a slow, even rhythm. There was no sign of the immense strain she had just endured, no sheen of sweat on her brow. She was the calm at the center of the storm she had just commanded. She unstrapped herself with the same deliberate economy of motion she used for everything and climbed down the ladder. Her feet touched the concrete floor with a soft, solid sound. The other pilots, who had filtered in from the ready room, stood in a loose, awkward semicircle. Their earlier smirks were gone, replaced by expressions of awe and a dawning, uncomfortable shame. They watched her, their silence a testament to the chasm in skill she had just revealed. They were pilots. She was an aviator. Anya walked to the bench and picked up her father's jacket. She slid her arms into the worn leather sleeves, the familiar weight settling on her shoulders like a well-known embrace. She zipped it up slowly, the sound of the metal teeth rasping in the quiet hangar. She turned, her gray eyes sweeping over the assembled pilots, not with triumph, but with a simple, placid acknowledgement. She had not performed for them or for the colonel. She had flown for the mission, for the 6 digital lives she had been tasked to save. Colonel Reed was waiting for her at the base of the platform. The other evaluators stood behind him, their expressions equally stunned. Reed did not speak. Words were inadequate now. Apologies would be clumsy. Praise would be patronizing. He simply stood there as she approached, his posture rigid, his face etched with a complex mixture of astonishment and newfound respect. He looked at the old jacket, but this time he saw it for what it was. Not a relic, but a legacy. As she came face to face with him, he gave a single, slow nod. It was a small gesture, but in the rigid world of military hierarchy, it was a profound concession. It was an admission of his own flawed judgment, a silent salute from one warrior to another. Anya met his gaze and returned the nod, a flicker of understanding passing between them. No words were necessary. The machine had rendered its verdict, and it was absolute. She turned to leave. As she passed the simulator pod that had been her crucible, she reached out her left hand, the one still covered by her father's worn glove, and rested it for a moment on the cool, matte black hull of the machine. It was a quiet, private gesture. A silent thank you, a moment of connection with the tool that had allowed her to speak her own silent language. Then, her hand dropped, and she walked away, her steady footsteps echoing as she disappeared into the shadows of the cavernous hangar, leaving behind a room full of changed minds and the quiet hum of a legend reborn.